Hello and welcome. This is the Enlightened Illumineers podcast. If you would like to be updated with the latest Lorcana news and meta, eventually when we get there, this is the podcast for you. I am your host, Trey. Online, you might also know me as Cabled. In this first episode, I'll be talking a little bit about myself, what is Disney Lorcana, and the products that have been revealed, the latest news that we've gotten in the past couple weeks. I'll also talk about my TCG experience, the reasons why I'm excited about Disney Lorcana. Then at the end will be a segment that I like to call Glimmer Galleries. Each Glimmer Gallery will take one glimmer or character from Lorcana and give a brief description of what they are in the movie or the media that they're from, and a few trivia tidbits that I think everyone should know. I'll give a brief, basic introduction of myself. My day-to-day job, I work at an architect firm making blueprints. I am very detail-oriented and like to find mistakes and fix them. I've been playing video games since Nintendo 64. Basically, I've played any kind of genre out there. My all-time favorites are strategy games, but I've played plenty of first-person shooters and a few MMOs. The first-person shooter that I was best at is either PUBG, when first-person mode first came out, which was a very long time ago, or Apex Legends, when that first 1 or 2 seasons came out. My all-time favorite video game has to be MapleStory. I grew up with that since 2008, like a couple years after it came out, and I've always played it off and on every other year. Played plenty of private servers. In addition to that, I've recently played a little bit as well, but that game is way too grindy. It's basically like a second job playing MapleStory. Any gaming community that I've been a part of, I've always wanted to do content creation. I've mostly felt like I've been too late to get into content, or my perfectionist mind deters me away from doing any kind of content and making mistakes. With Lorcana right now, I feel like this is the perfect time to actually start doing content creation, and I will try to get through any kind of imperfections that I might put in myself and try to do better. Because I know everyone's not perfect, and there's always a learning curve for anything. If you know me from any other community, you'll know that I'm the go-to guy to find all the information, and this is exactly why I'm making this podcast. Everyone knows that I will have the information for them, and if not, I'll know how to find it. Now, before we get to my TCG experience, let's get to the main reason why we're here, and let's talk about Disney Lorcana. So what is Disney Lorcana? Disney Lorcana is an upcoming trading card game created by Ravensburger, partnering with Disney. They're mostly known for puzzles, and they've made a lot of board games recently, specifically Villainous, and that's been very popular since about 2018. Here are a few quotes from the creators to give you an idea of what Lorcana will be. As an Illumineer, you'll wield 6 magical inks to summon glimmers of Disney characters. Glimmers can appear as familiar friends or fantastical reimagined forms. Recruit glimmers to your team as you travel through the world of Lorcana. In our game, it is 2 Illumineers trying to show who's the best Illumineer. These cards represent characters that you put together to form your team that summon from your Illumineer station and send them on quests to gain lore. They have also repeatedly said that the game is very easy to get into, but it has a lot of depth. It's hard to actually tell what they mean by this, because a lot of games always say this, but is it actually true or not? The time will tell. There's actually no gameplay details out yet, but there's a lot of card text that we can read from and gain a decent amount of information just to see how the game can function, but won't know how to play the game until spring. Who knows what the actual date that is going to be. Inks are the 6 different colors that the game's going to represent on summoning your Illumineers. Amber, which is yellow, Amethyst, which is purple, Emerald, which is green, Ruby, which is red, Sapphire, which is blue, and Steel, which is silver or gray. They're all gems but steel, and we don't know if it actually means anything or it's just what they went with. In the first set, which is called the first chapter, there's going to be over 200 cards, specifically 204 cards. In a future episode, I'll go over all the game keyword mechanics that we know so far. At a quick glance, the game does look like Magic the Gathering, but through context clues on all the card text, the game sounds like it's going to be a Magic plus Hearthstone plus Pokemon, and maybe a little twist here and there. Who knows? I will try to go over all the products that will be released on launch as quickly as possible, because I know everyone and all their mothers has already gone over it. It is known that the minimum size deck is 60 cards, and that there will be 3 starter decks at launch. As a deck building restriction, you can only have 2 different colors or 2 different inks in your deck, and these starter decks follow that same. The first deck is an Amber and Amethyst deck, which features Moana and Sorcerer Mickey. We don't actually know those 2 cards yet, but hopefully we will soon. The next deck is Emerald and Ruby, which has Cruella de Vil and Aladdin that looks like he's the King of Thieves. We do have the Cruella de Vil card most likely revealed already. Looks like the same exact art as the already revealed card, but we do not know the Aladdin one. The final starter deck is Sapphire Steel, and this is probably my favorite one. It features Aurora and Simba from Lion King. We were revealed Aurora, but we still do not know what Lion King's card looks like. In traditional card games, I prefer more control over anything, so I'm definitely leaning towards this Sapphire and Steel deck, although Sorcerer Mickey seems like it might be a control type as well, purely based on his art and actual no card information. I'm just going to get them all anyways, so does that even matter? In addition to the starter decks, there will be a gift set and an Illumineers Trove. The gift set has 2 cards and 2 oversized cards. These 2 cards are Hades and Mulan, and they seem to be the big bads of the set, with major archetype gameplay. We have actually learned a lot about this game between these 2 cards and what the overarching win for this game is, and that is to gain lore. In addition to those is 4 booster packs and a bunch of game tokens, and 2 tracker tokens as well. The Illumineers Trove is 2 deck boxes, 8 booster pack, a player guide, and a storage box. This Illuminator Trove reminds me of Pokemon Elite Trainer boxes, or ETBs for short. The main featuring cards on this is Human Form Maleficent, Taylor Mickey, and Elsa. This Trove also comes with tokens. The strangest thing to me is that in all 3 of these, starter decks, gift set, and Trove have tokens, but they're all very vastly different. The starter decks each come with 11. The gift set comes with 34, and 2 of them are tracker tokens. And then the Trove comes with 15. The 11 with the starter deck makes sense if you do need a tracker token. But then the Trove has 15, and that doesn't make sense to me. However, recently we did find out that there is some form of damage tracking. Damage might be persistent, and we actually might need all these token trackers. Spring really can't come soon enough. Each booster pack will have 12 randomized cards, 6 being commons, 3 being uncommons, 2 being a rare, super rare, or legendary card, and 1 foil card in every pack. So you could end up pulling a god pack having 2 legendary cards and a 3rd legendary card being foil. Who knows if that could actually happen, but I can't wait to see those pull videos. That is all the products that are featuring cards or booster packs. There is going to be a booster box that has 24 in each, Again, featuring on these booster packs is Human Form, Maleficent, Taylor Mickey, and Elsa. We have no official pricing yet on these products. There is a Europe and specifically German pricing on the Ravensburger official German press website. But other than that, we don't actually have any official pricing. So any price you see, any pre-orders you see out there is someone doing either a placeholder or trying to get a scam off of you, especially off eBay. Finally is the last products, and these are all accessories. There's going to have card sleeves, which is 65 matte finish. And I hope these are actually well made, because the majority of the company made sleeves are not as good as Dragon Shields, Ultra Pros, etc. There will be some deck boxes that hold up to 80 sleeve cards. I personally think the 80 number is just to give you some extra space. I don't think there will actually be any kind of side decks, but who knows. There will be playmats, and there will be portfolios, which will hold 64 standard cards and 8 oversized cards. So you can at least use 2 of those oversized card slots when you buy one of the gift sets. Now we can head on to the latest news that just came out in the past couple of weeks. One is the back of the gift set featuring Hades. There's a set of text at the bottom that reads, "Surrounding him with other villains and watch him gain a lot of lore fast." With this, we know that the little side pips on the cards are lore. And Hades' card text specifically says this character gets +1 pip, or lore as we know now, for each other villain character you have in play. And this signifies the main win condition of this game, maybe even the only win condition. We won't know for sure until spring. In addition to this text on the back, there is a QR code, and the QR code text right next to that says, "Check out the Disney Lorcana TCG companion app, where you can learn the game and more." And then it has rules in 3 different languages: German, English, and French. Right now, when you scan the QR code, it's actually a multi-redirect QR code, but right now it just takes you directly to the Disney Lorcana main website. But this is actually huge news, knowing that the company is actually going full force with this game and not trying to do a quick TCG run of the mill, getting anyone and everyone to buy stuff and then dropping it right away. They're actually putting in time to making a companion app. The companion app could be very simple and just card database. It could even be very functional, like similar to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Companion app or the Magic Companion app, where you can actually sign up for tournaments and much more. Or it could be like the Bandai Companion apps, where you get a simple but fun demo of the game. And it has all the rules and everything as well. Next up is a card we got early of last week, and is actually a brand new type of card too, called Magic Mirror. And this type of card is an item. And coming from Pokemon item cards, you attach it to your Pokemon. Well, item tool cards, and item cards are cards you can play as many times as you want. But in Disney Lorcana, this item card kind of looks more like artifacts from Magic the Gathering or enchantments. I don't actually know the difference between the two, but I've heard both, and in my eyes, I just know artifacts more than enchantments. Meaning that once you play this down, it'll stay on the board unless it gets removed from a different card effect. Magic Mirror is an amethyst. It's a 2 cost. There is no flourish at the cost location. Hopefully we'll figure that what that actually means, but right now we don't. The ability on it is Speak, ! And you will exert the card or tap it, pay 4 cost. We don't know the resource yet, and draw a card. In a vacuum, looking at it with other TCGs in mind, this card does not look good In total, it's a 6 cost to draw 1 card. And then if you want to be plus 1 card advantage, it's in 10 cost. However, we don't actually know what the resource system is like in Disney Lorcana. So this 4 extra resource could be very abundant. You could be leaving a bunch of resources up every single turn and having one of these on the board drawing you a card every single turn without a minimal amount of downside. This is actually really, really good. In due time, it will tell. And again, we'll just have to wait for spring. Surprisingly, we actually got 2 cards last week. The card that we got is Healing Glow, and it's actually our second action card. It's an amber card, which is the yellow color. It's a 1 cost with the flourish. The ability is remove up to 2 damage from chosen character. Now this is a pretty significant card for 2 reasons. 1, it does 100% confirm that damage is persistent in some way or form or fashion. And most likely it's just going to be on your characters whenever they challenge each other. So for example, if you have Captain Hook challenge into Jumba, Jumba will be left with 2 HP, and then you can clean it off with something that has 2 attacks, so let's say Elsa. Now if you're this Jumba player and you play Healing Glow, then you'll actually heal 2 damage from its, I assume it's defense and not actually HP health points. And so therefore the Elsa cannot come back and clean off Jumba. Another key point from Healing Glow is that it doesn't say your opponent. So that can mean 2 things. 1, that there's multiplayer built into the game, which I'm not the biggest fan if multiplayer is the defuncto organized play standard format. I personally believe that the organized play should be 1v1 because it's a lot harder to actually find 4 people for matches than it is 1v1, even if you're practicing with people. I understand Commander works really well for Magic, and it's most likely the highest popularity format that is actually played. Now, I don't mind it actually having multiplayer as a format, and I definitely like that it seems like it is supported right away, but I do prefer 1v1s, and I will for sure have fun in any kind of multiplayer format. Another key reason the wording on this card says chosen character is you might actually want to heal off your opponent's character. Maybe there is some kind of anti-priest archetype, or if you want to heal off a Corella Deville so that they can't banish one of your guys if it gets destroyed. Coming from Pokemon, Healing Glow reminds me of the old school potion. It's literally just the same thing, heal off 20 damage, which is 2 damage counters in Pokemon. In Pokemon itself, it was not the greatest card. There was plenty of other better healing options. With Lorcana, it's a little hard to tell with no rules, but I would say it's not the greatest card, and it might be like, if you don't know what to add in your Amber deck, you might just add a couple of these at the end. Personally, I'm more excited about Magic Mirror than Healing Glow, just because it's hard to tell how much healing you want, and I like card draw just in general. I like to have the control, and any control deck wants to have the biggest kind of hand that you can possibly get. And that's the last of the latest news that we've gotten in the past couple weeks. I can guarantee once I actually post this podcast that there's going to be something new, but I can bring that up in future episodes. I'm very excited about Disney Lorcana because 1, I've been a Disney fan basically all my life, grew up with all the movies. I am slightly a Disney adult. I used to have an annual pass to Disneyland in Anaheim. However, I do not collect anything Disney related, although that's probably definitely going to change with Disney Lorcana. And then I'm not necessarily against Disney tattoos, but I don't know if I'll actually get one on myself. I did have a Disney pass from around 2011-ish to about 2017. Maybe even 2018. And then stopped buying the annual pass just because it got too expensive. Eventually fast forward to about April 2020, and my fiance and I were about to get Disneyland passes again, and lo and behold, March 2020 happened, and the pandemic came and basically just shut everything down. Fast forward a little bit through the pandemic, eventually my fiance and I actually moved out of California, and we're in Arizona now. So we can't even really have a pass anyways. We do plan to actually go back to Disneyland every once in a while, but who knows when that will happen. And we also want to go to Disney World. We've never actually been. In addition to being a slightly Disney adult, I am very excited about the TCG aspect. I am very competitive. I love strategy games. And this is just perfect combination storm of these two genres putting together. I am slightly burnt out on Pokemon TCG, but that's a whole nother topic that I can rant about for a very long time. Both the game in itself and Pokemon, the international company in general, on the way they do things. So this just seems like a perfect opportunity to go into a new game that, one, I'll like the IP, and as of right now, just the few basic things we know what Ravensburger is actually doing with the game, it sounds very promising. Now that we've finished describing what Disney Lorcana is and why I'm excited about it, let's talk about my own TCG experience. As most 90s kids, I started collecting Pokemon cards during base set or base set 2. I didn't know any of the TCG rules back then, and I, like most kids as well, we didn't either. No sleeves were even back then, so most of my original cards were either destroyed or accidentally thrown away without knowing what the values of anything is actually going to be. The only cards that I have left over is a few Holos, a Blastoise, a Venusaur, and a couple EXs, the original lowercase EX. And none of these cards are in any good condition. They're easily all moderate or heavy damage. After a while, I stopped collecting or buying Pokemon cards, and eventually, in high school, I tried getting into Yu-Gi-Oh! And during that time, it was around the first introduction of Synchro Summons, and that was actually my first taste of getting the competitive itch. As a high school kid, I had basically no money, and maybe just allowance money, if that, doing chores around the house. So I could not buy the new shiny Synchro Summon stuff, and I basically had only 2 decks, either a Monarch deck, and at the time it was the Gold Treasure 2 set that came out, and I bought a couple of those and got a couple Dark Arm Dragons, and so I made a zombie Dark Arm Dragon deck as well. I did try a few couple local tournaments, and I did not do well at all. But trying in those local tournaments, it did give a little taste of that competitive drive that I do have now. After I stopped playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, there's a huge gap in not playing any trading card games. Eventually, in 2013, this is when I got started with my full dive into competitive trading card games. I got into Pokemon trading card game at the tail end of the black and white era, start of the X and Y era. I did travel a little bit during this time, but I was very off and on. I would play for 2 months, I would stop for 3, I would come back for 2 months, I would again stop. I was not very consistent at it, which means I did not provide any results. However, during this time, I did get top 16 with a little asterisk. I was in the last round. It was the winner gets top 8 or a chance to be at top 8. It was a friend of a friend who I was facing, and we played it out. A game went back and forth, and eventually it went to time, and it was a tie. At the time in the Pokemon trading card game, it was either frowned upon or against the rules if there's any kind of gentleman's agreement I can't remember exactly because it was back in 2014. My opponent and I were discussing what we wanted to do, and a judge came up and just grabbed our slip sheet, and none of us signed it and ran off with it. And then eventually we got called up to the front to sign the match slip, and a different judge was like, "So who won? Who's the winner? What's the outcome?" And I just said, "You won." The other guy won. I gave him the win because he needed more points to get his Worlds invite. After we both walked away from the judge, I told him he owes me one. Once the final standings are posted, we found out that my opponent that I faced got 9th place. He'd bubbled just outside for top cut. It's very unfortunate. In that tournament, I believe I got top 32, and I got some packs as rewards. This is before cash was prizes. And that's why I like to say I had a asterisk top 16 at the 2014 Salt Lake City TCG Regional Championship. If I recall correctly, it was about 200 players at the regional as well. I was able to cash in my You Owe Me one with this guy. I was able to borrow 2 tropical beaches from him in the last chance qualifier for 2014 Worlds in DC. Unfortunately, I went a 1 drop. And not necessarily I actually dropped, but it was a single elimination, and I stood no chance. I eventually stopped playing Pokemon TCG or following the scene in around 2017, and I missed all of the tag team era and the GX era. Finally, this starts the era of digital trading card games. I guess you would call them collecting card games because you can't trade on them. First off would be Hearthstone. I played that roughly just after beta came out. I played that for a couple months. I would say maybe 6 months max. Got to Legendary a couple times. Don't remember too much about it. At the time, I did like playing the Magician class and doing a bunch of burn type spells. I didn't do any kind of tournaments, and I kind of fell off on Hearthstone. I did pick it back up a few times during the topsy-turvy time when the Priest class had the 1-turn KO style deck. Basically had a 30% win rate at the time it first came out, but it was very fun to just do it as fast as you can just to win. The next digital card game comes, and this is probably the most controversial one and also the most disappointed one that I was a part of. And that card game is called Artifact, the Dota 2 card game specifically. I actually really liked the base game plan, how the game actually functioned. There was a few issues I had, but I was actually really fine with the creep and the hero placements. Also didn't like how long the matches took. The trading card game actually felt more like a board game than anything. I did a few tournaments right at launch, and I would always get to 1 or 2 more rounds before top cut. Eventually that game died out. They tried to revamp it with an Artifact 2.0 or whatever, and that just did not sit right with me, never played it, and then eventually they even canceled that as well. So shout out to all the Artifact long haulers out there, if you're listening. Next after that comes Legends of Runeterra, the League of Legends trading card game. I really liked that a lot. Played it at the start with the beta, played for maybe 6 months, took a 8-month break or so, came back, again, played another 6 months. I never really did any major tournaments. Max rank I actually got was Diamond, and I was literally like Diamond 1, maybe 2 or 3 more games away, and then just always kind of got tilted out. My favorite deck playing was Ash Noxus. I really liked the control and the freeze aspect of that, and setting all my opponent's attackers or blockers or whatever they're called to 0 attack. I truly do believe that Legends of Runeterra has the best digital trading card game client out there out of any of them. I would consider Marvel Snap a very close second, but that's still very new, so it's hard to tell. Eventually comes Master Duel, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game client. I really liked the time that I played, but the game itself, Yu-Gi-Oh!, is just not for me. I do not like the ban list system. I do truly believe all card games should have a rotation system. If you do not rotate, it's very hard to design cards focused more on huge power creeps instead of gradual power creeps. You always have to look back on 5+ years of cards to figure out something, and you can't design very well with that. When I was playing Master Duel, the deck that I gravitated toward was Prank Kid. That was very fun. Eventually it all came circling back to Pokemon trading card game for me. It's always nostalgic for me, and you can always pick it up fairly quickly. I started back up mid-2021 at the tail end of the pandemic, and I've been playing Pokemon TCG ever since. The actual Pokemon seasons didn't start back up until mid-March 2022. I wasn't actually able to attend that first tournament in Utah due to already having scheduled a play to go see with my fiance. A few of my friends that attended actually made day 2, and funny enough, one of my friends actually did win the tournament, and he actually won the first tournament that started cash prizings as well, and he won this tournament that's restarted the whole new season after the pandemic. It was just fitting that he actually won. My first event for the actual season wasn't until the actual last event at Columbus, Ohio for the North America International Championship, or NAIC for short. Leading up to the event, I actually stopped playing Pokemon for a couple months and was just actually playing MapleStory. And once it came down to the week prior, I saw a deck list ran by Jake Gearhart that had Arceus and Teleon with Ditto VMAX, and I immediately thought, this is the deck for me. I had a really nice matchup versus Palkia and Teleon, because the Ditto VMAX can copy attacks, so you can one-hit KO the Palkia Teleon, and they can't return that to you because it's a VMAX. Or you can copy the Radiant Greninja's attack and snipe 2 Sobbles or Drizzles, and they can't really come back from that. I actually started out really, really well in this tournament, going 6-1-1 at the start with one more round left, but unfortunately, my last round, I had completely dead drew game 1, and then game 2 I got donked. It was the fastest round I've ever had, but at the time it didn't matter because I was already with my minimum 6 wins and 1 tie to be able to make day 2, so I got in at the 6-2-1 record to make day 2. Unfortunately, during day 2, I wasn't playing as fast as I should have been playing, and a couple misplays to where I went a record of 1-2-3. I had way too many ties, and maybe one of the ties should have been a win, but the other 2 ties are probably going to be actual ties, and there was no way I could change that. Maybe playing a little bit faster, but being my first major tournament back since 2016-ish, 2017, and getting into day 2, my first ever day 2, and getting top 110 out of 1,100, 1,200 player tournament, I thought I was on cloud 9. As of right now, I can confidently say that I'm the highest placing Ditto VMAX player so far. There's still 2.5 more months left, maybe even less, when Ditto VMAX is still standard. So someone could snake that in, but as of right now, I can still hold that on my little trophy platter. Usually NAIC is the ending season tournament, and that's usually at the end of June. And then the next major tournament is Worlds. If you get the invite, you can go and play. I did not have a Worlds invite, but one of my local friends did, and we play tested a ton. But unfortunately, he did not do that very well, because when we play tested, we just did not have very good playable hands on either end, so our testing was very skewed. For the start of this next season for 2023, my first tournament wasn't until October in Salt Lake City, Utah. I played one of the newer decks featuring the Lost Zone mechanic, and I was very familiar with this ever since they came out in late September, early October. But unfortunately, I kept doing a little mistakes here and there due to my not very thorough testing. And I could have easily changed at least one tie to a win. And then I had another very unfortunate tie that was caused due to me not being able to draw my boss after digging through my deck about 10 cards. During that tournament, day one, my last round, I needed to win this round to get points. The deck that I was facing also had a counter to my deck, having the Empoleon V that counters my basic Pokemon abilities, so I couldn't search through my decks. I definitely could have played this a little bit differently on that round and might have kept a different card, but I was already kind of drained after playing 9 rounds, and it's just unfortunate. My next tournament was early December in Toronto. This is actually a last-minute decision going to this tournament because we found out that flights were very, very cheap, so we booked it, and then I also picked up a new deck last minute the week of. The deck majority of players were gravitating towards was Lugia with a bunch of little tech attackers, but the deck that I found online on a Japanese YouTube channel was Lugia Deoxys. And it was actually doing really well for me. I started 3-0, and after lunch happened, it was just tie after tie after tie, and one loss due to playing control, which I had slightly 0 outs, but I had a better chance with my deck compared to the regular Lugia decks. Again, with my minimal amounts of testing, I could have easily changed 2 ties into wins, and that could have costed me to go into day 2, but unfortunately, once I finished round 8, I realized I had no opportunity to get points, so I just dropped from the tournament then. It was a very sad, unfortunate ending, but I did like the deck choice. It was a meme, but it actually functioned how it did. My next 2 tournaments are actually just not tournaments at all. The next one is mid-December in Texas, and I made a poor choice to eat a gas station breakfast sandwich. Round 1, I lost due to a very unfortunate donk on game 3 at time call. And that was actually a hard matchup for me too. So even if I got a tie, that would have been a win for me. And then round 2 was versus also another auto loss. And I actually got a tie on that. But I gave the person the win, and I just had to leave the tournament convention center and went back to the hotel and just slept it off. I could not function after that breakfast sandwich. But the next day on Sunday, I was feeling a little bit better, and I actually had a good time at Six Flags, so it wasn't all a waste. But it's still very unfortunate where who knows how different things would have been, even at a 0-1-1 start. I really liked the deck choice. It wasn't a perfect build. I definitely saw a lot better builds out there. The deck choice was Lost Zone Rayquaza. My next tournament was start of the year. It was in San Diego, California. This one was just very unfortunate. The night before, we were eating at the spaghetti factory, my fiance and I wasn't feeling the greatest. I felt something in my throat. I was trying to drink some water. Then come the next morning, and I woke up completely in cold sweats, a fever most likely. I didn't have a thermometer to check, but for sure I had a fever. There's definitely a bunch of people just telling me, play, play, play. I won't tell anyone, just play, but even if I did play, not being able to actually think fully and function, especially playing with Lost Zone Rayquaza, a very difficult deck to play. It just wasn't in it for me to actually try to play. So I just stayed in, and I actually slept all the way till 5 p.m. that night. Thankfully, the next morning I was actually feeling a little bit better. We went to the aquarium for a little bit, and then I just had some really bad anxiety after that. My social meter was just too high, even though I didn't really hang out with a bunch of people at that time. That has been my 2023 season so far with Pokemon TCG. I for sure do have one more tournament left that I'm going to attend, and it's at the European International Championship, or EUIC for short, in London. That tournament's not until the second week of April, and it'll be right at the start of the brand new rotation set. It's going to be with a bunch of new cards, and I'm very excited about that. I definitely need to start practicing with all those new cards now, but I'm way too excited for Disney Lorcana. That finally brings it all back to Lorcana, and I'm very excited to hear any and all news regarding organized play. This can definitely be a way bigger topic in a future episode, but I hope that when they say they're going to have a robust organized play system, they actually mean more than just local promo cards and actually have some kind of tournament system set up. They don't have to start it right away, but easily something that starts in the new year. I am by no means a very top player, or even a professional if you would want to say that. I would consider myself above average, but let's be honest, a lot of people do say that. I do tend to top any local tournaments at my shop for Pokemon, so there's that. I actually hope to prove that with Disney Lorcana. I'll try my best in practicing as much as I can, and me creating this podcast and any kind of content creation will help me get there. Now, with all that said, we can get to probably my favorite segment that I'm going to be doing throughout all this, because it's also going to help me learn more Disney lore, and then I can also help teach you guys more Disney lore. And this is the Glimmer Gallery section. In this first segment, I'm going to go over probably the one that I don't know the most out of all these cards is Robin Hood. Now, I say that because I haven't seen Robin Hood in literally since I was a child. I know the basics of Robin Hood, of steal from rich, give to poor, but that's basically it. And we all kind of need that in today's age. I definitely should actually go back and watch all of these films, but I'm also a sucker for new stuff and not old stuff. Robin Hood is a 1973 film released on November 8th in a runtime of 83 minutes. Its budget was $5 million and the box office got $33 million. And you probably would have guessed that it's based off of the legend of Robin Hood. The movie actually has a 55% on Rotten Tomatoes for the tomato meter, and then the audience score is an 81%. The movie info is an animal rooster called Alan O'Dale tells a story and sings songs of the heroic Robin Hood and his trusty sidekick Little John in this animated animal-themed adaptation of the legendary story. When evil Prince John deputized the sheriff of Nottingham to collect unreasonable taxes for the animals in the Sherwood forest, Robin, Little John, and other merry men wage a light-hearted battle against their evil foes. Robin Hood is a legendary heroic outlaw originally depicted in English folklore. According to legend, he was a highly skilled archer and swordsman. In some versions of the legend, he is depicted as being a noble birth, and in modern retellings, he is sometimes depicted as even fought in the Crusades, before returning to England to find his homes taken by sheriff. Traditionally, he is dressed in a Lincoln green. He is said to have robbed from the rich and give to the poor. The origins of the legend, as well as the historical content, have been debated for centuries. There are numerous references to his historical figures with similar names that have been proposed as possible evidence of his existence, some dating back to the late 13th century. At least 8 plausible origins to this story have been mooted by historians and folklorists, including suggestions that Robin Hood was a stock alias used by or in reference to bandits. The film actually reused a bunch of footage from previous animated films. This was during Disney's financial slump following the completion of Phase 1 of the Florida Disney World project, and they just allotted a small budget to animation studios. This is very noticeable during the song and dance number, The Phony King of England. The characters' movements strongly resemble those of the Jungle Book, Aristocrats, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. At the time of the release, Robin Hood had a lot of weight on its shoulders. Many were treated as a benchmark to figure if the studio can carry on without the late Walt Disney, since this is the first film without his name being featured in it. Surprisingly enough, Robin Hood was actually very successful upon its initial release, garnering around $9.5 million, the biggest Disney attraction at the time. It brought even more during the 1982 re-release. Here's a few couple trivia facts that I think everyone should know. Robin Hood, Little John, Friar Tuck, Trigger, Prince John, and Sheriff Nottingham appear at Walt Disney Parks and Resorts as meetable characters. There is a unique version of Robin Hood that gives Prince John the place of main villain instead of Sheriff of Nottingham. Phil Harris's voice as Little John is virtually identical to the voice he used as the character Baloo in Disney's Jungle Book. Both characters were bears, look generally similar except for their color. This is the first Disney film to end with the end Walt Disney Productions, which would be the norm for end titles until The Fox and the Hound. Now let's talk about the card Robin Hood. Robin Hood is a sapphire card, or the blue color. Robin Hood's style is Unrivaled Archer. It's a 6 cost with the flourish cost at the top left. Its attack is 4, its defense is 4. It's Storyborn and a hero for its 2 attributes. Its first ability is Feed the Poor. When you pay this character, if an opponent has more cards in their hand, you draw a card. Its second ability is Good Shot. During your turn, this character gains Evasive. They can challenge characters with Evasive. Robin Hood also has 2 lore pips off to the side. Robin Hood is number 157 out of 204. I believe the rarity symbol will be super rare, but we don't have full confirmation on that yet. And the artist is John Lauren. Right now, I would actually say what kind of decks would like to play Robin Hood or can actually be fit into a deck, but clearly we don't have any rules for the game or not enough cards to even make decks. So right now, I'll just speculate that Robin Hood might not be in the Aurora and Simba starter deck, just because Aurora looks more control, and this Robin Hood has some aggro aspects to it. The reason why I say that is control actually likes to hold a bunch of cards in their hand, so when you actually have the opportunity to play Robin Hood, your hand's going to be too full to even take advantage of Feed the Poor. And then Evasive on your turn, it's hard to tell what that means, but that could be you actually can just quote unquote go face on your opponent to gain your lore, and that seems aggro to me. On second thought, looking at the starter decks again, the Amber, Amethyst, Moana, and Sorcerer Mickey deck might actually be the control one, which might lead to the Aurora and Simba or the Sapphire and Steel deck being aggro. We do know that Captain Hook seems pretty aggro. It does look like the overall best card we know right now. With Aurora's ward ability, it could translate to an aggro card as well. If there is some kind of burn spell cards, for example, like Dragonfire, targeting your characters. If there is some that can do like 3 damage target. And if you're going aggro face with a bunch of little small guys, your Aurora's ward ability can actually prevent those from being targeted, and you can gain your lore pretty quickly. Again, it's too hard to tell and speculate a bunch of things just because we have no rules and how the game actually functions, but it is fun to speculate. This episode has gone long enough now, so I can start wrapping it up. In future episodes, I want to talk about all the cards in detail. Would probably do 2 colors an episode, maybe 3, depending on how many cards have been released by the time I get to each episode. And who knows how many more cards they're going to be revealing. I personally hope that they start revealing 1 new card every week, and then once we get the actual gameplay in spring and game rules, that they'll start doing easily 3 cards a week, because we're just under 180 days away with about 15 cards revealed so far. So they definitely have a lot of time to spoil a bunch of cards out periodically instead of doing it all in 1 week. And with that to end, thank you for joining me on the first ever Enlightened Illumineers podcast episode, and I hope you'd come back for more. You can find me personally at Cabled on all social media platforms. And you can find the podcast at EN Lumineers on all social media platforms as well. If you have any questions or comments or any feedback, please at me or the podcast as well. My name is Trey Cabled. I hope I have enlightened you with all Disney Lorcana news, and there'll be plenty more to come.